seems that it's happening in a very similar way all over the West. I mean, we see here in Australia, we recently had a bill which was called the Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill, designed effectively to give the government power over what was true and what wasn't true on social media and remove it. That was finally, because of the outcry in the community, removed. But then a week later, a bill to ban social media for under 16s, which we've been told is a world first thing, which is incredible, passed the Senate with an hour's debate and is now going to stand to be law in Australia. But we see these things rolling out across the West, and a lot of them in Five Eyes countries. Is that happening by chance, or is it happening because the West has just lent itself? I mean, I've heard theories that the East had their time with communism and now it's time for the West to have to go through that ringer. Hope that's not true. What's driving it, do you think?
That is a good question. But you're absolutely right. What we're seeing, what I described, what people have been describing in the last 4 years, we're seeing that in every single Western democracy. And it was the Western democracies that were literally targeted, with their approach of, we need to take away your fundamental rights, which are really, privileges, by the way, that the government can grant and withhold depending on how you behave. We've seen this in every single Western democracy. The reason for that is simply this. You didn't need to do any of that in China because China already is a totalitarian state. You don't have to do any of that in North Korea because North Korea already is a totalitarian state, right? You don't need to gaslight people there. You tell them something to do and you do it. And if they don't, you impose draconian measures on them. Like in China, people were literally being, bricked in their own apartment so they wouldn't be able to leave it, right? So, but in the Western democracies, you couldn't do that because we're democracies, right? So what they are trying is the gaslighting, what is happening here. We need to protect the elderlies, right? Well, is it protecting elderlies to have them in solitude, isolated from their loved ones? No, it's not. This is the most inhumane thing I've ever heard of, to be quite frank. So, we want to protect the kids. And, all of these good things, like the greater good, once again, to infringe on these fundamental rights. And you were speaking about misinformation, disinformation, and, people need to be protected from that. Well, first of all, who's defining what misinformation and disinformation is, right? So looking back, it was the European Commission that was the headquarter of spreading misinformation. It was the Western, the governments in the Western democracies that were spreading the mis and the disinformation. So it's also we need to take note of what's the difference even, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. This is the new thing, by the way. So misinformation is a factually not true statement that you repeat that not knowing better, right? You had false information, you thought it was true, and you're repeating that. So disinformation is the deliberate spreading of factual, untrue information. Now we get to malinformation. What is malinformation? Malinformation is factually, objectively true statement, but it is deemed harmful. So now they're even going after that. And an example for malinformation would be to state there is only two sexes, men and women. It's a factual, objectively true statement, but it is deemed harmful. The question is, harmful to what? Harmful to their narrative. Only to their narrative. That's what that is harmful for. So they want to suppress that. Another thing, if I may just expand on that a little bit, what they also came to realize is what they failed to do in the Western democracies is to impose the real severe restrictions. So the elected representatives they would have loved to impose even more restrictions, severe restrictions on you, but they couldn't, because we are in democracy and they are up for re-election. And had they done so, they might not have been re-elected. So, and here's where the WHO now comes in, right? Now they want to give these competencies via the WHO treaty to the WHO to protect the elected representatives. So now they can say, well, we would not have ever imposed those restrictions on you, but it wasn't up to us. The WHO was doing that. So go after them. But you can't go after WHO, because guess what? You never elected anyone on the WHO. So the citizens have no recourse anymore. They're removing the democratic processes away from the citizens, put it to some unelected body, and then they are home free. They can do whatever they want. And you are absolutely right in assessing the Western democracies are in deep trouble here. And I always, refer to us, we're spoiled brats. We no longer put any value on fundamental rights, freedom, the freedom of speech, none of that, because it's always been here and it's always going to be here, right? Well, it's not. And if people don't wake up and start fighting for the democracy and democratic principles, then we will wind up in a totalitarian state. And we are actually on our way to go there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Malcolm. Appreciate that, Christine.